Welcome to the Filipino American Women Project, a podcast show that shares stories and life lessons told by individuals living or have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female. I'm your host, Jen Amos, a fellow Filipino American woman, and I'm excited for you to join us. Let's get started. All right. Hi, everyone. Jen Amos here with the Filipino American Women Project podcast show. And as always, I have my incredible co-host with me, Nani Dominguez. Nani, welcome back to the show.
Hey, everybody. What's up?
And we are stoked like we always are. I feel like I need to come up with more adjectives other than stoked and excited because whatever, fill in the blank. We're pretty excited. We're pretty blank about this episode because every time we do another show, it means that we get to introduce another incredible woman in our Filipina community who is living in America or used to live in America and is of Filipino descent. So let me introduce you all to Fabella. She is an ethical fashion blogger and founder of The Flip Side. She sheds light on Philippine ex-creatives and designers. She discusses her own mental health from time to time, and she's decided to pursue a less linear path by pursuing creative endeavors like at The Flip Side. Flip has 2 P's in it. Her journey towards ethical and sustainable fashion is also imperfect. Kara, welcome to the show.
Hi, how's it going?
Pretty great, pretty great. I almost forgot to press record because we were already talking offline for like 15 minutes. Yeah, that could have gone for a while. But why don't we start, Kara, by you sharing, how did you hear about this project? And more importantly, why did you choose to be on our show with us today?
So I heard about this through my sister, who actually recently did an interview with you guys. And serendipitously, I also happened to run into Nani a couple of weeks ago at a Philippines creatives community event in San Francisco. And to be honest, though, in terms of sharing my story, I never really thought about sharing my story. It kind of just fell into my lap. But what I will say is that my sister, who also decided to pursue a less linear path, inspired me to pursue the dream of The Flip Side.
Awesome. That is so beautiful. I'm just curious, what is the age difference between you and your sister?
I think a couple of years. A little over 2 years, actually. So yeah, we're pretty close.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. I was watching a video on her Instagram about what inspired her to write her book. And she had mentioned that before she even conceived the idea of the book, she used to write love letters to you on like lessons and about life and stuff like that. Does that sound about right?
She did. Yeah. I mean, honestly, we try to have like weekly phone calls when we're not as busy. And the love letters I seen from time to time, it's more motivational pep talks that I tend to get from her whenever I've been like anxious or stressed or even happy. It usually happen with phone calls. But yeah, when I decided to pursue The Flip Side, she definitely gave me more and more pep talks and notes and messages of like encouragement for it.
I think that's so beautiful. I'm just prying into your relationship with your sister because I have a younger sister, and there's a part of me that had always wished that she would consider the non-linear path. And not that I'm trying to force her, and if my sister's listening, because I think she listens to these shows. I love you, Josephine. But I always thought it would be so cool. I mean, in the past, we tried doing sales together, but then eventually, like after college, she had traveled the world for like 2 years. And I think she was like in Spain for about a year as well. And then, she currently lives in New York and she's working, I believe, an admin job and then trying to pursue her art on the side. But every time I felt like she started to kind of ask me like entrepreneurial type questions, I would like light up. But I've always been that kind of sister. At least I think I am. So Josephine, if you're hearing this, you let me know. But I'd like to believe that I was always that sister that would always just kind of meet her where she's at. And then if she needed advice, I would give it to her. And then if I wanted to give her unsolicited advice, I would say to her like, well, I really want to give you advice right now, but I know you're not asking for that. But if you do ask for it, I have something to tell you. And so I think my question along that is, have you ever felt like your sister was maybe like hovering over you or like trying to help you like with your life, or you know what I'm trying to say?
It feels pretty in sync with what you're telling me about your relationship, or at least how you view your relationship with your sister. I have felt that at times she's, as you know, she's like a brand storyteller. And so she likes to, create narratives for people, or at least help direct people to the narrative that they want. And I think she always tries to do that for me whenever we have these conversations about like my life path, and even more so since she started her business. So it definitely feels like that sometimes. Sometimes I accept it, other times I fight it, maybe because inherently I feel like it's invasive, because when we're your siblings, and so there's more of a dynamic of like, because you love them and they're always going to be in your life, you can fight them more. And I think, and that's not in necessarily like a negative way, obviously, but like I do feel that sometimes with her, like she can view this path for me that maybe I don't see as clearly myself. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think it does. Like I get a sense of like, I feel like when you're talking, I feel like sometimes like I feel a sense of what my sister would probably tell me.
Yeah.
And so it's just really cool to kind of live vicariously through what you're saying. And I think it's awesome. I think the sister dynamic is always quite fascinating to me, because I have a very special place in my heart for my sister. And there's a part of me that wants to protect her, but there's also a part of me where it's like, she's her own human being and I can learn a lot from her. I remember in the past when people would ask me who my role model was, and she's 5 years younger than me, I would tell people my sister's my role model, because it's so fun to kind of experience life through her perspective, because she didn't have to deal with the expectations that my brother and I had to go through with our parents. So like trying to be,
Right.
My brother was the eldest son, I was the eldest daughter. Like we got to make it work. We had to be the example to our younger sister. And my sister, she was the first one to actually move out of the house at 18. I moved out like at 25. And she was the one that was able to be adventurous. And I feel like her success is really our success, because we were able to create that safe environment for her to just go exploring. And as she continues to go exploring today and everything. So anyway, I'm just rambling about my sister now.
No, that's so sweet. It's really endearing to hear. What is the age difference between you guys?
So my older brother, he's a year and a half. We're a year and a half apart, and my sister and I are 5 years. So I'm actually the middle child, but my mom like placed a lot of responsibility on me growing up. And I think it's probably because of that female like dynamic. So a lot of times I would have been mistaken in our family that I was the eldest sibling just because of the way that I carried myself. But yes, we are 5 years apart. I totally gave you a long answer there.
No, I love hearing. I mean, obviously this is what it's all about, this podcast, hearing more stories about other Filipino American women. So I am happy to hear it.
Yes. Well, it's cool. I just have this special place in my heart for people, for like younger siblings and only children. I don't know what it is. I just feel like I have to take care of all of them, or like whatever.
Auntie Jen.
Yes. Yeah. Donnie, you're an only child, aren't you? Or are
Technically,
you?
yes.
Technically. Okay.
I'm the only one from my mom and my dad. My dad has been married a few times, so I have a couple of sets of step siblings. And then I also have a half brother that I've never met. But other than that, I'm by myself.
Yeah. Well, that's the first time I'm hearing that. But also, I just feel like it continues to affirm why we get along so well on the show.
Yes.
So,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So for our listeners,
it all makes sense.
Yeah. So for all our listeners, Nani and I have a lot in common, we discovered. So first of all, we discovered that we're both December babies. So she's the 21st. Yeah, 21st, and I'm the 15th. And then we discovered we're both Sagittarius. So
yes, even more rare.
Yes, that's right. So not that I'm like a big zodiac sign person, but I get told quite often that I'm a typical Sagittarius person. So
yeah,
there's that.
But I'm still kind of unclear on what that entails.
Yes,
I am too. I never quite understood that either. Like I exude Scorpio traits. A lot of people say, like there's this post that I put up like a couple of days ago on my Instagram account, and one of my like good like ethical fashion friends was like, "That's such a Scorpio thing to say," and I was like, "Oh, I don't know what that means."
Yeah, is that a compliment or an insult?
I think it was meant to be just like a funny, humorous thing. She actually happens to become friends with a lot of Scorpios. So because she's not a
okay.
Scorpio
So she
herself.
notices those things.
She
Yeah.
does. Yeah, she definitely likes to point them out, which I love. It's funny.
Yeah,
Yeah, she probably knows a lot more about Scorpios than you do being a Scorpio.
I know. Yeah, I'll have to pick her brain more about that.
Yeah, I have a girlfriend like that. Shout out to my friend Leia. She's all about signs and she talks about it all the time. And I don't have it memorized, but like the way she'll talk, it's just like, wow. Like, I mean, I'm not gonna look up a dictionary to find out these signs, but I mean, if it helps you like navigate life, if it helps you navigate life, good for you.
That's all that matters.
Yeah. So I have another way of like figuring out, like in our work, we identify people based on their personalities. And like, for example, we say, oh, you must be a blue because you're very system oriented and detail oriented. Or like, for example, my husband is a yellow because he's like the big visionary, big idea guy. He's the one that tends to like have people come flock to him because of his ideas and stuff and whatever. And then you have like the red who's very go, 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 get things done, very, very task oriented. And then you have the green who does things out of loyalty. So you think of like, if I were to describe all of those as like dogs, which I actually cannot right now. I don't even know why I'm going to try this right now. But like a red would be like a pit bull. A green would be like a lab. A blue would be like, I don't know of any dog that's like methodical, like a Chihuahua. I don't know.
Maybe like a Shiba Inu or.
There you go. Like, yeah, one of those type of dogs that are kind of uptight and like picky and territorial. Yeah, like that. Yeah,
that sounds perfect. Like a Shiba Inu.
Yes, perfect. And then what was the other color? It was so green's a lab, red's a pit, blue, and then I know I'm missing it. Did I say 4 colors already? Okay, wait, blue, red, yellow, green. Okay, I feel like I said them all. Anyway, I'm going to move on from this. I'm totally getting off topic. It's sort of one more thing I wanted to share is like, it's sort of like I've been told before, like years ago, I had this like older lady, like in her 40s or something. She just said to me, "You're such a millennial." Like she said that. And literally, no joke, I didn't know what that meant at the time. Like, I feel like millennial has been a very popular word in the recent years, but I actually researched into it. And I later got to find like, okay, I could see a lot of those traits like totally being me. So I guess she rightfully stereotyped me. Yeah. So that was my last thought on that. Okay. We are moving on. This is not the Jen show. Okay. Kara.
Hi.
Hi. So this show is really about highlighting stories and life lessons told by individuals living or who have lived in America that are of Filipino descent and identify as female or she, her. And so we'd love to hear a little bit about your family background and also why you identify as a Filipino American woman.
So I'm a first gen. I identify as like a Filipino American woman in the sense that I still feel very predominantly Filipino raised because my parents were immigrants, now US citizens. And so I felt, and I think most gens can tell you that they feel this way, that it is a struggle to kind of balance your parents and grandparents and relatives like cultural values without having been born into that culture. I mean, you're born into it by your parents who are Filipino, but you're born into a society that tells you to assimilate. And I think I remember a time when, or I think this might have been like a discussion that my sister and I had of like growing up, and we were speaking Taglish when we were toddlers because, you know, like we grew up with our parents speaking English and Tagalog, and so we'd pick up on certain phrases here and there that were Tagalog. And so we'd go to preschool or kindergarten and like use some of those terms, not knowing at the time like what the English phrases were or the English translations were. Yeah. And I remember this one time, I don't know, I was like in a tickle fight or something with like another classmate. It was probably like kindergarten or first grade. And I said, like, don't tickle my kili, which is like armpit, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't know that it was called an armpit. And I think maybe like after that, and I was like trying to tell my teacher like that this was happening, not like telling on my friend, but basically just like telling her that this was happening. And she was like, what is a kili? And I was like, this. And I kept pointing to my armpit. And I think like maybe that or something else had like stemmed like a conversation or discussion rather with my teacher and my mom about like, hey, you need to teach, you need to make sure that your kids are that you're speaking English in the household more often because certain phrases they're using aren't English. And it's sometimes hard to
Wow.
understand, which isn't, I get that in some ways, but also like that's part of our culture. That's something that we shouldn't necessarily have to erase. But yes, it was just interesting. It was definitely something that stuck. Anyways, but yeah, in terms of like my background now, or my background, my family, and just growing up, I grew up like most Filipino American families do, just like lots of extended family over and relatives. And so it was very lively during the weekends, which was always fun. But I think education was always like a huge priority for my parents, as I'm sure both of you probably know as well. It's something they wanted to allow us more opportunities. But I think in a lot of the schools that I went to, there definitely felt like there was a divide between like my school days and my weekends. Like I was bridging two different worlds just because on the weekends you're with people who look and eat and think like you, and it's loud and rambunctious and fun and comfortable and familiar. And then like you go to school and it's different. You're having to kind of readjust your mindset. And I don't know if you guys identify with this feeling at all, but I feel like I'm probably not the only first gen Filipino or even whatever who probably felt that. So yeah, I think, and then after that, during my most formative years, my sister and I transferred to boarding schools out east. And so I felt an even bigger kind of distinction between like this world that like I knew with my family and my relatives, and then this new world that I was kind of thrown into. And I definitely had to learn to adapt pretty quickly and kind of assimilate like certain norms, I guess. When I did come home for breaks, it definitely felt harder to connect with relatives and like family friends. I really did feel like I was missing out on a lot of what like my fellow Filipino American friends were doing. And so I felt really pulled in two directions. And I think I said that earlier, like I felt like I had like one foot in this world that my parents worked really hard to get me into. And then the other was just this old familiar feeling of Filipino cultural values, but it felt really foreign because I was gone most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
well, by those standards, I feel like you are definitely a Filipino American woman because you have to constantly shift your mindset depending on who you're around. And I feel like that's a lot of our experience, at least the common experience that a lot of us have in this community.
Definitely.
I was just going to say that I can definitely relate to the whole feeling like you're living in two different worlds. When I was younger, growing up, really, I didn't have any Filipino American friends. Well, not any, but very few outside of my own family. And so what I knew about the Filipino culture was pretty much only within the context of my own family. I was an only child and my parents were divorced, so I spent half of my time in a house being an only child with my mom, and then half of the time in a household with my dad, which was either with a step family, which had a lot of kids around, or we were always also staying with my grandma or my grandpa, which also like a bunch of my other uncles and aunties and cousins would be staying at the same time. And so I was always surrounded by like this big family on my dad's side and like a complete opposite 180 on my mom's side. And then you throw in going to a school. I went to school in Oakland, and not that there's not Filipinos in Oakland, but back then where I went to school, there wasn't. It was primarily white, Black, or Latino. Latinx. And I really didn't know much about, like I said, the Filipino culture outside of my own family. So there was definitely that need to code switch, as we've said before. That's become, like Jen said, just part of the nature of who we are.
Can you just imagine, like, I don't know, just being a white person that like never has to code switch? Could you imagine like what that would look like?
Right. Like how much time would that free up? How much like brain space would that free up?
Yeah.
It's like those little microaggressions that you experience while you're in those environments that are so nuanced. They're really hard to kind of bring to the surface if you're not in an environment like this, where it's kind of an arena for you to throw around and play with ideas based on your experiences. But if you don't have that space, it's kind of hard to identify those microaggressions and learn how to address them. And I think that that's why essentially we all do the code switching thing, so that we just don't have to explain ourselves.
Right. Yeah. No, it's easier. It's easier because you're better at readjusting. So,
Right. Like I'll just become whoever I'm around so that they don't notice that I'm not one of them.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Jen Amos here, jumping into the middle of our show, as I always do, to remind you why this show is possible. So, you know, at the end of every episode, I tend to say, if you didn't catch our guest contact info, don't worry, we'll have those in the show notes. Check them out. I worked so hard on them. You're welcome. Well, it's been brought to my attention that our show notes are not as easy to find as I thought, which is why starting summer 2020, the Filipino American Women Project is proud to be partnering with Captivate, the world's only growth-oriented podcast host. Captivate is created for independent podcasters, designed from day one to help you to focus on audience growth and the expansion of your audio influence. One way that Captivate makes our lives easier as independent podcasters is by taking the guesswork out of making a website for your show. That's right, a website for your show. So listeners, starting summer 2020, finding our show notes will be so much easier, all thanks to Captivate. You're welcome, as always. If you're about to start podcasting or are getting burnt out from all the extra work of producing one, like building a website, consider a 7-day free trial, that's right, free, with Captivate by visiting thefil-am-woman.com. That's the Fil-Am, short for Filipino American Woman.com. Or, check out our show notes in the meantime, which is in the details section of each episode. Once again, you can visit thefil-am-woman.com or visit the details section of this episode.
No, I totally get that. I mean, as someone who switched schools pretty often growing up, and again, like leaving for the East Coast and being away from family for years, I definitely felt that I did have to adapt really quickly and really often. And it's interesting too, because like I grew up mostly with a lot of Filipino American friends and family. And then, like as soon as I left, I felt obviously like the majority of my friends, there were a lot of international students where I was, but predominantly it was like Caucasian people. And I did feel that because it was always deemed as like a positive thing for us to adapt, even like from our parents, like you just have to adapt.
Right. It was encouraged.
It was definitely encouraged. I think I remember, whenever I'd come home or whenever my mom or dad would visit to see me, like one of the first things that my mom would ask would be, are you making any friends? Like, how are your friends? And I would tell them, they're nice, they're great. And she'd always ask like, what are they? And I'm sure that that's a question that's always asked. And usually like, I would always be like, oh, are they Caucasian? And it just so happened to be that, yeah, most of them probably, they were Caucasian. And I always thought of it as a really positive thing that I could gravitate towards mostly Caucasian people. That meant that I was adapting really well. And so I'd come home for breaks and then I'd see old family friends that I hadn't seen in months or years even. And it was hard to identify with them, like, or readjust to that. There was this inherent feeling of not quite feeling as accepted as I once was, because it was the life that I was choosing for myself, or that was essentially thrust upon me going to boarding school. I was considered in some ways like an other. And I think that we sort of talked about that, I think at the Halo Halo Collective event. I don't know if you remember that, Nani, but like just Filipino American women can come from all different types of backgrounds and be mixed or whatever. And it doesn't make them less Filipino. You know what I mean?
Right. It actually contributes to the experience.
It completely contributes to the experience. And I think I always struggled. I think when I got here to San Francisco, kind of established myself a little bit more and started to want to reconnect with my my relatives out here, and found the Halo Halo Collective. I struggled with looking back at how my behavior was, and just to have to adjust and adapt to a predominantly Caucasian group of friends. And I struggled to look back at those times and understand that I was pushing back a part of my identity that was always there, and maybe felt that it wasn't good enough for society or whatever. But now that I'm out here, I'm starting to realize that they can essentially cohabit one another. So coexist. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know. It's still a struggle sometimes. Whenever I do see relatives out here, I do feel sometimes that we can't, or in the very least, they don't want to understand where I'm coming from, or how my experiences were a little different from theirs. Because what different sometimes means to them, oh, she thinks she's better than me, or oh, she doesn't understand, she's not here all the time, she's not always seeing her relatives, she's not always there to support and be part of every single Filipino gathering. It's kind of black or white. And I don't know if that's something that you guys have ever experienced with your family or family friends, but I definitely feel from time to time that with my family that I have to either be fully in or fully out. And it sucks, to say the least.
My experience with my family, and I totally can relate to that. And then also in a way where I think my side of it, I feel like the best way I can explain it is that I actually have this mental block with a lot of my family and my relatives. And so I had mentioned this in previous episodes, but I grew up with a lot of abuse. I had dealt with emotional abuse and neglect, financial abuse, and I was molested every time I would visit the Philippines by my first cousin. So for me, when I think about my family, I feel unsafe. And so, but also, even if I did come forward with a lot of these issues, which I did, I experienced a lot of emotional neglect. And I think it's just a cultural thing. I noticed a cultural thing within my family where, and I'm sure a lot of families can relate to this as well, but they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to be confrontational. And so for me, rather than try to be around my family, and not my immediate family, we're cool. I love my immediate family. I'm going to see them for the holidays after I see Nani in San Francisco. But yeah, so immediate family is cool. But cousins and other relatives, it's just difficult for me because I just think to myself, I could come back and be this more mature person, grounded person that could just try to be myself around them. But I've come to a place where I'm just because the hardest thing about a lot of my relationships in my family is that I feel like they're toxic, but for so long I had dealt with it because they're family. And so I put up with all of it. And now I've come to this place where I'm I've learned that if you find yourself in an abusive relationship, you need to get the fuck away from it. So excuse my language. It's and unfortunately, I had felt that way with my family. And had I tried to even confront them about it, no one wants to talk about it. So I would not be surprised if my family actually listens to the show and they're not going to tell me anything about it. I had 2 years ago, I was actually for Filipino American History Month. 2 years ago, I was featured on a local newspaper, and I had shared all that. I shared my the abuse that I went through and the neglect and getting molested. And it was so interesting because my family on Facebook, my relatives actually liked the article when I posted it on Facebook, and my molester, my cousin, he actually liked it too. But in terms of reaching out, nothing. There was no like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry you went through that. Like, it was all about like, oh my gosh, Jen's been featured, not about, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
Jen's been hurt. You know,
Yeah.
she's been
Yeah. Like,
bruised.
did they even read
Right.
it?
Like, did you even read it? Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And so there's a part of me that is just gotten to a place where I'm just so unapologetic, kind of putting them under the spotlight, because it's not like you all can like research into me and find them anyway. Like, I don't show them anywhere on social media for the most part. So, but I have to share that. It's my truth. And for a long time, I felt like I had to hide that story because I didn't want to offend them. Right. And so for me, I just feel like I've just, in my situation, I just don't even bother. Like, I just don't even bother to be around like my relatives, because it's just like, it's not my life's mission right now to like bond with them. And I have found a safer environment doing this podcast show and learning about my culture and my heritage, that like, and I'm finding healing in what we're doing on the show. And if it's going to take me, I don't know, hundreds of episodes before I finally feel comfortable to be around my family, then so be it. But not today. Not today.
I get that. Well, I'm really sorry that happened to you, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's
awful.
Thank you for sharing.
I definitely get that same. I mean, I think that the code switching thing for me at this point is probably the most prominent when I'm around my own family, which has been really frustrating for me to deal with, just because I feel like your family is supposed to be your soft, comfy landing. You need when you need something or when you're feeling down. And for me, my family is what triggers me. Mm-hmm. My family is the toxicity, if that's a word, in my life right now. And just like you said, Jen, I'm at a place in my life right now where I cannot continue to bend over backwards and break my own back on their behalf. I have to start working on standing up straight on my own. And that's what I found here. And I'm just so like glad that I've been able to, like you said, Jen, find another way to connect with my heritage and my culture. I feel like my grandparents were the last people that really made me feel safe like that. And now that they've both passed away, this is how I find that soft, comfy landing.
Definitely.
I feel like we're all like orphans in our own families, and we found each other. We've adopted each other.
We have a new family, yes.
Yeah.
Which is better, which I like. I'm into it.
Yeah, no, I'm all about it. I love it very much. Well, awesome. Thank you, all of us, for sharing. Let's go ahead and fast forward to your life today, Kara. So for people that are getting to know you for the first time, why don't you share a snapshot of your life, particularly what keeps you busy and most excited about life nowadays?
Oh, well, you caught me at a really good time. It's been quite busy for me recently. It feels pretty good right now. So I've been trying to pivot career-wise for a little while right now. So like I have a full-time job, but the flip side is essentially also kind of like a full-time job, but it is my side hustle at the moment. But I actually just got hired at a company that's definitely more aligned with my values in terms of like the sustainable fashion industry. So I'm in the process of transitioning into that right now. So that's been really exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. On top of that, I'm actually working to finally build a website for the Flipp side. So I've been basically like doing my full-time job, doing stuff for the Flipp side, as well as like working on this really kind of intensive brand clarity workshop for it. So it's definitely asking me a lot of like the hard questions, but also I need to get this launched, and I'm really excited to see how it turns out. The people that I teamed up with, I say I'm really confident in like their abilities. So very excited about that. But in terms of just like daily life, well, I live in San Francisco, obviously, and I've been living here for, well, on and off for, I can't even think right now, maybe 6 years now, I think. Yeah, pretty much 6 years on and off now. But yeah, my days, as I said earlier, my days are pretty heavily scheduled. I've got endless notes in my planner and calendar alerts. Otherwise, I just forget most of the things that I need to do.
Same.
Simply, yeah. Essentially, yeah, like having a full-time job.
That's a millennial thing too.
It is a millennial thing. So it's not, if someone told me I'm such a millennial, I would be like, yes, I am. But anyways, yeah. So the full-time job, right now is obviously takes up most of my days. And then, of course, working on the flip side, which I said earlier feels almost like another full-time job, but one that I happen to love very much. On my days off, honestly, or during my lunch breaks, or even in the evenings after work, I'll just be planning more content, connecting with brands, coming up with ideas for another shoot, researching more about sustainability and ethics, just so that I'm doing my homework. And of course, hitting up networking events like Halo Halo Collective, which I love. It definitely has connected me to a lot of really amazing Filipino American women out here. Well, and I met Nani there. So that was a really nice surprise. Yeah. So as far as the flip side goes, and that's really kind of my main sort of passion right now. Obviously, for most influencers in general, like most influencers probably understand the hustle, especially if they have full-time jobs as well. But a lot of people don't realize how much goes on behind the scenes. And I really commend anyone who does this and executes it very effortlessly. But yeah, I mean, in spite all of the time management that goes into it, I do love it. This is definitely the first time in my life where this hustle feels worthwhile and genuine to who I am and what I've been dreaming of for a while. And as far as, fun goes, I definitely just try to cultivate and maintain a community of friends who are very passionate about what they do. I also actually have a partner who's in the creative field as well. He works in the film industry. So we kind of like to feed off of each other's energy and bounce ideas off of one another. So shout out to Craig. He's incredibly wonderful and very patient with me. I tend to go off on a tangent sometimes about career and the flip side and hoping that they'll merge eventually. And he's always there. He's like, I think he's tied with my sister in terms of like number one fan. So it's really, really nice. Yeah.
I love it. So I have to ask, what is the flip side about?
So the flip side, So the flip side is really about me representing a lot of ethical and sustainable fashion brands and just promoting slow fashion in general. When I was in college, blogging started to become a thing. I did actually have a blog that I started writing about fashion, and I started posting outfits, and it eventually fell to the wayside just because of school, and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do with it. And so, yeah, that kind of like got swept under the rug. And then fast forward to like a couple of years ago, this Instagram thing obviously was a really good sort of introductory thing for a lot of people who wanted to pursue fashion and being an influencer. And, at that point, I had really started to rethink my shopping habits, my consumer habits. And when you're living in a place like San Francisco, everyone's fairly conscious about, like what they're eating and where they're shopping and asking a lot more questions. I mean, we're in a time where we should be doing that. But yeah, I started to my brain started to churn a little bit more. And I was like, I really need a creative outlet right now. And my friends are always coming to me for like fashion advice or like, where did I get this thing or whatever. And I was like, why don't I start an Instagram account for specifically slow fashion? And so I don't know if you guys know much about like the slow fashion world, but basically it's just anti-fast fashion. People like me try to just like shed light on, circular fashion. So, like vintage shopping, thrift shopping, wearing brands that encourage capsule wardrobes, or brands who focus on the sustainability aspect, like in terms of their materials, or they focus on like the factories and how ethical those are. And so I started this account, and then it kind of started to blow up a little bit more. And I started shooting a lot more often. And then all of a sudden you're getting brands kind of flooding your inbox, and you start having brand sponsorships, which is super fun. And yeah, now I'm just trying to sort of monetize it a little bit more, and which is why I'm starting the website. So yeah, I mean, I shed light mostly on ethical and sustainable fashion, but every once in a while I'll have like a really raw tidbit about my mental health. I suffer from anxiety, which definitely led to bouts of depression on and off throughout the years. And yeah, so I'll talk about that. I'll shed light on that like every once in a while on my feed. But yeah, I definitely feel like I need more of a platform, AKA like a website, to talk about all the things that I'm super passionate about more in depth. So yeah, that's what the Flipp side is. And as far as the name goes, so Flipp, I mean, that's like another way of saying another kind of abbreviation for Filipina. And I tried to do the Flipp with just one P, but I guess that was taken. So I just put two P's in. So
there you go.
That's why it's spelled wrong, but it was just taken.
No, I think it's very clever. And I love your feed. I've been thinking for myself, like I haven't updated like my personal Instagram account, I think since like March. Like it's been some time now. And I've been thinking long and hard about like, I was like, should I consider doing some kind of influencer stuff, only because like I do these podcast shows and people are finding my personal accounts that I haven't updated. And I'm just like, and when I do post stuff on there, it's usually on stories and it's just like dumb shit, that I put on there.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of like, I've been thinking long and hard about like considering something like that, like to do with my feed and everything. And I just have to say, like, I just love your feed. I mean, do you have like a photographer that follows you around everywhere? Or you're like, you see a stranger, like, hey, do you mind just taking a picture of me against this wall? Like, no big deal. Like, how is that like, if you don't mind me asking?
I definitely don't have the balls to do that. I would be super self-conscious of doing that. But I know a lot of pioneers in the fashion influencer space have definitely done that. So like I said, my boyfriend's actually in the like film industry. He's like freelance. And so he has like a good eye for lighting and he has like a really nice camera. So when I first started doing this as more of like a hobby, he was shooting me and he had fun with it and I was comfortable with him. So it made more sense. But as I started to need to shoot more frequently, I did hire a photographer who's super cool. He's also Filipino. Shout out to Nico. That's my photographer. He's awesome. And yeah, so like I definitely feel comfortable with him. So if I'm not shooting with Craig or if Craig's too busy, I'll usually hire somebody. And I tend to shoot in bulk. So I'm sure you see on my feed, like it's definitely like a lot of like repeat things, like outfits that I kind of tend to scatter throughout the feed to make it look more cohesive. But yeah, I have a lot of fun with it. I'm excited to see where it's going once the website's launched. We're definitely trying to hone my aesthetic a little bit more.
Well, I love it. And you look great. All of your photos. And I feel like you just shared some good social media advice for anyone that was interested in being an influencer. So thank you for sharing.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I want to check in with Nani real quick. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to share before I ramble on?
No, I'm just listening, taking notes. I'm actually working on setting up a real website for my blog as well, which I've just had like a free blog thus far. So just listening to your tips.
Great. Well, I'm still trying to figure it out as I go as well. So I'll stay tuned.
Yes. We'll have to have like coffee or something because you have a lot of good tips.
Okay. Well, we can have coffee anytime between December 17th and December 15th because that's when I'll be in town.
I would love that.
I think we can make that work for sure.
That would be amazing.
That'd be great. Yeah, I guess I'm just going to put this out there in the universe and to our listeners, but we don't have a website yet. And I have been thinking about this for literally years, like since I started this project. And I have a lot of excuses as to why we haven't put together a website yet. But that's definitely something that I'm looking toward doing in 2020. It's just that right now, the priority for me is getting our stories out there, like through this podcast show. So that's a primary focus. And also if anyone, like, not that I've ever had anyone complain about our Instagram feed, because I literally just have like 20 pictures on there for the Filipino American woman. Like I have a plan for that, y'all. So just be patient. There's a lot of work that gets put behind the scenes for publishing an episode, first of all. And also I like doing the stories because I feel like it's not as committal. Like I feel like you just like take a picture and do a quick video and like that's just easy. And I don't know, I feel kind of very intimidated by the feed. I'm admitting that now. It seems very intimidating. I feel like I have to like post influencer type like status, like type images on there.
You really don't. You're doing a great job, honestly.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, all things come in good timing. So if anyone is ever wondering about like our Instagram and other social media stuff, just it takes time. But I always believe the beginning of this year, I have told myself that I want to do things right and not do them fast, because I've done that. I've done things fast and it did not get me to very pretty places. So I just want to thank the community and our listeners for your patience. And if you miss us so much, just repeat an episode. There's plenty of episodes that you can listen to again and again and again and again. So Kara, so tell me if this is like what you consider like slow fashion.
Okay.
So back in San Diego, when I was living there for like 20 years before I moved to Virginia, my friends and I used to come together like at our church and do clothing swaps. And so we would just kind of pull our clothes from like the back of the closet, clothes that we thought we'd wear one day, but we never did. And we could never fit in no matter how like hard we tried to convince ourselves. So yeah, we just pulled that out from the closet and then we just had clothing swaps. And till this day, I mean, I did order like new clothes like in the last year or two, but for the most part, most of the things I wear are from my friends. So is that slow fashion?
I guess that could be considered in like the circular fashion space, which I guess is associated to slow fashion. And I think that's amazing that you do that and have been doing that, because like that's like a huge thing now. I actually just got like asked to participate in a clothing swap with a bunch of other influencers or whoever, like slow fashion peeps. And yeah, I've actually never done one of those myself. I've always gotten invited to them, but like for whatever scheduling reasons or whatnot, it's just never happened. But yeah, no, that's definitely considered it. I think, I could go on and on about like the slow fashion, ethical fashion space, but yeah, clothing swaps are really, really cool. And I think that it should be encouraged even more.
Yeah, I mean, I used to do, okay, so back in high school, when I used to do student government, it was like one of the first times like I was required to wear a dress to go to dances and stuff like that. I was like, I hate this, but I had to wear a dress anyway. So what I used to do, I don't think this is slow fashion in any way. I feel like this is me just like messing with the system. But I would go to a, I don't want to like say the brand because if for whatever reason they hear this, but I would go to a store. I would go to a store and I would find a dress and I would buy it. I would keep the receipt and I would keep the tag on the dress. I'd wear that dress to the dances, and then the very next day I would return it. And that was my version of like, I don't know, slow fashion.
Oh my God. Well,
I think we've all done that.
We've definitely done that before. Yeah. I just like would have been worried about like sweat stains or something after a dance. So props to you for doing that.
I got so comfortable doing that because I was super frugal and resourceful back in the day. I got it from my mama. She was a single mother. So like I learned a lot from her, but not that she she always made it a habit to return stuff. Like even on Christmas Day, when we would open up our presents, the first thing she would say is, "Do you like it? If not, I'll return it." Like that's what she would literally say the moment we open up our presents.
That's so funny.
And so she always kept the receipts. But anyway, I remember there was this one dress. It was my prom dress. Mm-hmm. And the tag was just stained. Like you could almost like not read the label. But the store still took it. Like they still took it.
Wow.
So
you're probably talking about Nordstrom.
I'm going to say no.
but it's a yes. It's okay because everybody knows that Nordstrom had that policy. Okay. And I think that they've since changed it. So it doesn't really matter if we call them out on it now because everybody knows that. Everybody used to do that.
Yeah,
at Nordstrom specifically.
Yeah. That's actually funny. Yeah, no, because their return policy is super flexible. Also, if something like, maybe they changed this too, but like if something like broke and they still have that same item in stock, they'll give it to you for free. I actually like did that once and I didn't even have the receipt because it had been so long since I received that item. And they were like,
"Oh, I'm so sorry." 20 years ago, and it's broken.
Yeah, I got this like 5 years ago. But yeah, no, it's crazy. I don't know if they're like a little bit more strict about it in terms of like you need your receipt, but yeah, I mean like it was a necklace and I loved it. I like wore it to bits, and yeah, it eventually did break because of so much wear and tear, and like they still had that same style in stock, and they just replaced it for free, no questions asked.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know if that's still a thing they do. So don't hold me to that.
Man,
Don't count on it.
I wonder if these companies like know. I mean, they have to know this happens. They just have to.
Yeah, no,
I'm
they
sure
definitely
they
do. And that's why, I mean, I worked at Neiman Marcus for 1 year.
Yeah.
And we're like right up the street from Nordstrom in San Francisco. And so we would always get people coming in trying to do that, except our return policy was not nearly as lenient. So I was very familiar with theirs.
That's great. Well, yeah, I mean, as far as like the slow fashion space goes, like if you did want to know a little more about it, I'm still learning, honestly. There are so many people that I've met through Instagram just doing this that I'm learning. I'm constantly learning from. So for me specifically, I love to represent and obviously like wear and shoot with like ethical and sustainable fashion brands. I'm sure you've heard of places like the Reformation or Everlane, of course. It's getting super big. And I think there's definitely a stigma around these types of brands that tend to be like a higher price point for a lot of people. And one thing that I can say is, the whole point of slow fashion is not consuming as much. Of course, you can also argue about like the marketing campaigns that some of these brands do, but the idea behind slow fashion is, like consuming less and getting pieces that are built to last. They don't necessarily have to be the most sustainable. In my opinion, they don't necessarily have to be the most sustainable material. Obviously, it's great if they were ethically made. I think that's definitely a huge thing for me. I have to make sure that like where I'm getting a lot of my items, there's transparency in terms of like the factories that they're using. But I mean, vintage and thrifting is also a much more affordable alternative to just purchasing from a lot of ethical brands that do tend to be a higher price point for people. And so, I mean, there's a lot that's within the slow fashion space. I think one of the big things that happens that a lot of like my fellow like ethical influencer friends tend to do are they're like 10 by 10. So they basically like create a capsule wardrobe of items that are already in their closet. And for 10 days straight, they use those 10 items and build outfits with them. And it's really cool. You should follow. Actually, one of the girls that does these things, she actually was with me, Anani, at Hollow Hollow Collective. Her name's May of Raisa. She's super cool. I actually, I think I wrote her down. But she does those a lot. And you can find within like those hashtags for like fall 10 by 10s or spring 10 by 10s on Instagram, like a bunch of people that are in the slow fashion space that do that. I haven't actually participated in one of those myself just because it's hard for me to like shoot every day with different outfits. But I think it's a really cool way to encourage people to kind of like get creative with their closet and encouraging less consumption.
I think that's awesome. I am definitely one person that doesn't like care if I wear the same outfit. Like, okay, so no joke. The last 3 conferences that I went to in the last couple of weeks, I literally wore the same attires. I was all like, these are different people. Who are they going to know? I mean, other than my friends that follow my stories, they'll notice I'm wearing the same stuff, whatever. Like I'm that kind of person where it's like, hey, like I have no one to prove. Like I have nothing to prove to like anyone. I will wear the same shit. Like that's just me.
Definitely.
Like for this winter, for example, in Virginia, I have learned that it gets really cold in the East Coast. And so I got this down coat for like the first time. Like I never bought a down coat, like one of those long coats with like feathers in it that keep you really warm. That was basically like the only thing I wore last year for winter. And that is the same thing I'm going to wear for this winter, along with maybe a scarf. I'll maybe switch a scarf on occasion, but it's typically going to be like my blue scarf and my green down coat and my thermal leggings. And the only thing that'll really change is like my underwear and probably my top. But that's about it. Yes, it's important to change your underwear, everyone. Very important.
Every day.
Every day. Even if you don't shower, it's so good to change your underwear.
No capsule wardrobe for underwear.
Yeah.
That's so funny. Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, especially in the wintertime too, like when you're out east, like no one really cares what you're wearing. You're just all trying to stay warm. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Yeah, I pretty much wear like I go between like 2 or 3 different coats like throughout the year that I use, and like I have like one scarf that I literally own one scarf actually. Because I mean, yeah, it doesn't get that cold out here, but it definitely gets pretty cold and windy. So
Mhm.
Yeah. I've got like two.
there you go. Yeah.
Well, you both have more coats than me. So there's that.
Nice.
The only place where I feel like I had to wear different attire was when I was in San Diego. I don't know, like I just felt like, not that I think people were shallow there, but I felt like I just felt like a sense of insecurity if like I literally did wear something like 2-3 days in a row. But I would still make it work. Like I remember when I used to go networking, like I'd go to like 3 different networking events like 3 days in a row, and these are all like different social groups, right?
Right.
So I would just wear the same thing. And anyway, I don't know. I guess I don't really care. Like if anyone notices, then that's a good thing because then they remember me, you know, and hopefully not because they think I'm disgusting, but like that's definitely not what I want. But anyway, that's just, I guess this is just me trying to like stand up for myself right now and be like, I can wear whatever I want, how often I want.
Yeah. You do,
Yes.
girl.
No shame.
You can.
and I-
You absolutely can.
Yeah, and that's what's so great. I think about like the capsule wardrobe idea too, is like just work with what you already have. People aren't really going to care what you wear. I mean, to a certain extent, you like love to present yourself well. As someone who loves fashion, like I love seeing trends, and it's something that I'll always kind of like research. At the end of the day, though, like no one really cares. Like it's about the energy that you bring to a
Mm,
room and
yeah.
whatever
Right.
like whatever you're passionate about. But yeah, so capsule wardrobes are great. Repeat outfit offenders like unite. So I get it. I get it.
I love it. I just, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I have to like explain myself, but I feel like I've already over explained myself. So I'm done. I'm done. Yes, I'm a repeat outfit offender. It's fine. I'll
I'm
embrace
with
that.
you, girl. I'm with you. I
Yeah.
totally get
And
it.
I just wanted to add one more note before
Yeah.
we move on. But I do like the idea of like paying more for items
Right.
because a lot of times they do last longer. And wherein if you get something like at Target or Walmart, it's kind of like the difference between shopping there versus, I don't know, what's a high end version of Walmart and Target? Does anyone know?
I have
Hmm.
gosh, I can't
Maybe like a
think of
Kohl's.
Yeah.
maybe. Yeah, or
Maybe a
like
Kohl's.
off Fifth or like one of those like last call by Neiman Marcus or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically it's like it's kind of like the difference between like, yeah, you could buy something cheap, but
Yeah.
it'll break and wear or tear faster.
And
And
then
then
you're
if you
just gonna have to purchase something again, which sucks.
Yeah. So in the long run, you're actually spending more on cheap things than you are on like high quality things that are more expensive, but they really do
Yeah.
last longer. It's kind of like one thing I learned last year when I started keto diet is like they encourage you to eat high quality fats, meat, and veggies. And at first I was like, man, this is like really expensive. Like how many times can I go to Whole Foods? But what you find is that you're less hungry because
Right.
you are you're consuming more nutrients versus like if you just eat bread or something or you go to like a fast food restaurant, like you're almost hungry like a couple hours later where like
Exactly.
so I think that's kind of I feel like that's
It's a
the
really
theme
good
of what we're talking
analogy.
about. Perfect. Okay,
Sorry,
good. My second analogy sounded so much better than my first analogy. That's good to know.
No, that was perfect. That was super spot on. Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that. Like, obviously, these price points aren't good. Like with some of the ethical fashion brands, like the price points aren't going to necessarily be for everyone. But if you're doing your research, and if you really need something, if you really need to replace something, it's better to find a quality, ethically made item as opposed to just going to the nearest, like I don't know, chain, like say H&M or whatever. And this isn't to shame anybody who's shopped there, but I think another thing about the slow fashion space is making sure you do your research about where these items are coming from. There's a hashtag, I think, that came out like a few years ago when there was I don't know if you've heard about Rana Plaza. It was out in forget what happened, but it was basically like a factory where they were making clothes, and it just was in such horrible condition. Like the infrastructure was so bad that it just collapsed, and there were like a ton of people that were still working there when this happened, like factory workers that died. And that was the price of fast fashion. And I think that really shed light for a lot of people about wanting to ask more questions about how their clothes were being made, where they were being made, and who made them. And the hashtag that generated from all this was "Who Made My Clothes?" If you look it up on Instagram, it's like a really big movement. Fashion Revolution is a really good platform that talks about, the price of fast fashion. So yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to be in this niche of like ethical fashion, because there's that side where people need to be like educated on like where their clothes are coming from and who's making them and all of that. But then there's this other side of it where there's the affordability of a lot of the ethical and sustainable like fashion brands. I mean, there are some that are actually fairly affordable. I'd say Everlane is like one of the more affordable ethical fashion brands and really good for wardrobe staples. But then there are some that really just generate like such a high price point. But I think at the end of the day, it's what you choose to do and like how often you're going to be wearing those clothes. So if you're thinking long and hard about the item that you're trying on and asking more questions when you're at the store, you're doing your due diligence and hopefully consuming less that way.
Wow. That's awesome. I dig it.
Yeah.
I feel like there should be a fashion documentary. Like there's all these food documentaries that talk about like, where's your clothes really from and everything. But Kara, I have learned so much from you today about the fashion industry. So thank you.
Thank you. And well, coincidentally enough, there actually is a documentary about fast fashion, and I can't remember the name of it. I know it's on Netflix, but I can send it to you later, actually, if you'd like. Once I figure out what it is. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. If you find it, you can just DM us and then I'm happy to add it in our show notes later.
Great. That's awesome.
Hey, everyone. So I went down this rabbit hole of understanding what fast fashion was. And I wanted to add the movie that I believe that Kara was referring to in this part of our interview. So if you want to learn more about fast fashion and slow fashion, fast fashion versus slow fashion. A really good documentary is called The True Cost. Now, it used to be on Netflix. I was, like I said, going down this rabbit hole of trying to find this movie. And it looks like in the past it was on Netflix. It's no longer on Netflix from what I'm finding. But if you do want to learn more about fast fashion and what it's really costing us, check out The True Cost. Their website is truecostmovie.com. And I'll just read a little snippet from their website just so you can learn a little bit more about it. The True Cost Movie is a story about clothing. It's about the clothes we wear, the people who make them, and the impact the industry is having on our world. The price of clothing has been decreasing for decades, while the human and environmental costs have grown dramatically. The True Cost is a groundbreaking documentary film that pulls back the curtain on the untold story and asks us to consider who really pays the price for our clothing. So check it out, truecostmovie.com. I'll also include it in the show notes. I don't believe it's on Netflix anymore. Hope that helps, and I highly encourage you all to check it out. All right, let's get back in. Cool. All right, well, we're going to shift gears into my favorite part of the show. I mean, every moment is my favorite, but this is like my favorite. So the purpose of the Filipino American Women Project is to publish a book which will have a collection of life lessons and stories told by the Filipino American woman. And so for this part, Kara, you had mentioned in your notes that you're still trying to figure out life lessons as well. But the one thing that you feel like you can take away from the last couple of years has been about investing in yourself and your ideas and not be afraid to take that leap. And so I'd love for you to elaborate on that. And you did mention that you realized this in the last couple of years. I'd like for you to share a story, maybe a series of stories that really led you to this life lesson of investing in yourself.
Okay. Well, this goes back to just like from being born. I there was a dynamic, and it's a dynamic that a lot of first gen Filipino Americans and just minorities probably tend to feel, like the weight of achieving more and achieving it the way that is considered most successful to your parents or grandparents or whoever, or father and mother figures. So I think because of that, that my anxiety might have stemmed from that mindset. And I'm sure a lot of people probably struggle with that too. That ends up happening. But I am pursuing a less linear path now. But for a very, very long time, I rarely thought twice about the decisions that I decided to make that were ultimately being made for me. And so by the time I started working and getting out into the real world, I was kind of just going through the motions. I was doing my jobs well, but I wasn't, obviously deep down, I felt like I could find something else, or I might have, that I wanted something else. And I think when I decided to make the switch, or rather, when I decided to start the Flipp side, it really was like a baby step into something that I had always been thinking of doing, or even tried to do back in college, but I just didn't think it was good enough, or that it would generate success for me. And I think in doing that, it also, in a way, it sort of redefined what success is for me. Is different for a lot of people. Success is, like the family, the nice home, really comfortable 401k, all of that, that's stuff that I think is great, and maybe stuff that I'll eventually have someday, hopefully. But for me right now, it's just finding contentment in what I'm doing. And for me is this baby. It's the Flipp side. It's having what started out as a creative outlet for me and is now something that I'm starting to actually get fair compensation for. Hoping that it generates more like compensation in the future. But yeah, like it's starting to. And I don't know if this answers your question, but yeah, I think it started from when I was younger to pursuing a more linear path, and then kind of veering off from that in, I guess, the last couple of years. And I think additionally, investing in myself or investing in oneself doesn't necessarily mean taking a huge leap of faith. It, like, for me, can be baby steps. I live in the most expensive city in the world, I think. And to pursue this full force, for me, I'm not sure if I could do it. And so what I'm doing right now is doing it on the side until it eventually becomes more of a full-time hustle. And in the meantime, I'm working a full-time job to maintain a level of comfort, I guess. And thankfully now the job that I'll be starting soon is more aligned with what I'm actually doing. And so they're sort of merging at this point. So yeah, it's a long road ahead still, but yeah, I mean, investing in yourself is probably the best thing you can do, even if you think that it's too late.
Yeah. And it's not like you have to run full force with it. It's not like you have to quit your daytime job to do it. Those pockets of time where you're like Netflix and chilling anyway could be used for your passion.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the people that actually decide to take that huge leap of faith, I totally commend you guys, because like it is hard and it's worrisome. Like my boyfriend, I think he always knew what he wanted to do. Not always, but like in high school, he pretty much found his calling after just taking like a film class. And so that stemmed his like desire to pursue it in school, and now full-time he's a freelancer. So, but it's tough. It's really, it kind of fluctuates. It kind of ebbs and flows for him in terms of like getting the gigs. And so, but it's doable. It's totally doable. For me, it's something that I'm working towards in a slower way, but I commend people who do actually take that huge leap of faith.
Well, I was just thinking like how you're describing where you're at on your path is, I think, similar. It's kind of like the midway point or somewhere in the middle between kind of where I'm at and like where Jen's at too. Yeah. For me, I feel like the same way. I've always had my blog, my Notes by Nani blog, since years and years ago, but I keep tearing it down every time I get insecure about it, and I just scrap it and start over. And I've done that so many times that thinking of like the thought of me quitting my full-time job to invest myself 100% in that is super scary. And so I'm also kind of doing what you're doing and using my downtime and my free time to work on that until I can find my niche and like turn it into something that actually can generate income, and also trying to find ways in my current professional, like where I'm at in my career, also trying to find ways to integrate like more creativity into that as well. And eventually I would love to be able to tie the two together. But like you said, it's just like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get that done? Like there's no, when we were in school going to college, there was kind of this idea of, okay, well, you go to college, you get your degree, and then you get a job and you stay there for 40 years and collect benefits, and at the end you're good to go when you stop working because you have that 401k money, blah blah blah. For this path, there's not a template for that. We weren't taught how to navigate this space while we were in school or anywhere else really, and so we're all just kind of here doing it on our own. Me still at like the beginning stages, you're kind of like a few levels up, and then Jen has been doing it for a while. So we're all kind of in the same space together. And even though it seems really gray, like just gray everywhere you look, at least we're all here to support each other and help each other out.
Exactly.
Beautifully said. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You go ahead. It's your show.
I was just going to say tonight, I hope you find the courage to really keep moving forward with what you're doing with your blog, because I'd love to hear what you have to say.
I appreciate that.
I second that.
Thank you.
I just wanted to say, like, for someone that has been in this freelance entrepreneurial, whatever you want to call it, unemployment type journey for about a decade now. Yeah, I mean, the struggles haven't changed. Like, it's not like I'm a millionaire or anything. And I just have to give it to my husband. So the first time I pursued all of this was really a result of employment. I was fired from 4 jobs. And so my best friend, like consecutively in like my young 20s. And so my best friend was like, I don't think you're meant for that. So
it was definitely a sign.
Yes. Yeah. I agree. And so it propelled me. Like I got into sales, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And I remember when I heard people that would go to school to get a degree in business, I didn't even know what the word business meant. I was like, man, that sounds like really fancy. Like I had no idea until I found myself in it. And I feel like the first half, really the first 2/3 of the decade, it was hard. Like, there was like 3 years in a row where I would double my income like every year, 3 years in a row. And then by the 5th year, I had lost like 5 of my major clients. And I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to pay for bills next month? And I was already, even at that time, I think it was kind of a reflection of my mindset too, because at that time, my husband and I were working more closely together. And so when we moved to the East Coast, I took that as my opportunity to like work in his business. He says it's our business, but it's really like his vision. So that's how I kind of separate it sometimes. And so if it wasn't for him, like I'm pretty sure, like I'm grateful that he's in my life, because those initial years of trying to do it on your own it was so hard. And I know Nani's heard me talk about this in our previous interviews, just how difficult it is. And even till today. But the fun thing now is my husband and I, because we are commission based with what we do in our business, it's nice to do it with someone who kind of just like laughs about it. It's kind of like, oh, let's try to figure it out next month. And his background, he actually was, what is it? So he was a veteran, and then he became a financial advisor for about 10 years. So he like understands money. So hadn't I been with someone that understands money, oh my gosh, like I would be in a different place today. So yeah, it's hard, and it's not a sexy career at all. Like I probably should shower more, but I'm at home most of the time. So like he's looking at me, and just like with these calls, we're not doing them videos. So I'm not wearing makeup and all that things. Yeah. So it's not a necessarily sexy lifestyle in any way. If anyone thinks this lifestyle is sexy, like it's so not. But the reason why I do it, just in case anyone's like wondering, like, well, then what's the point? Like, if you're not going to get the 401k, what's the point? For me, at the end of the day, it's not necessarily about the money. It's about the lifestyle. Because for me, I'm an introvert. I've hated working in like open space offices, whatever you call them, like the ones where you can like see your coworkers while you're working. I cannot do that. I cannot, for the life of me, I cannot do that. Like one time we went to a friend's like office, and he was showing us like his new office, and it was like behind glass windows. So it was like he got one of those corner offices, so yay him. But like the moment I walked in, like you just see this entire room of like desks just facing each other, and there's no like separation at all. I like jokingly hyperventilated. I was like, oh my God, like how can you even like do this? And so I get overstimulated in those type of settings. And so it's always just been difficult for me to work an office job. But even though this journey is hard, it's like, well, any journey is hard. So you might as well pick one that like accommodates the life that you want. At least that's my philosophy. And for me, the lifestyle has been worth the struggle. So if anyone is looking for lifestyle, like this is why I have pursued this crazy, unpredictable journey and everything. So yeah.
I get that. I mean, and you're also probably defining what success is for you. I mean, it's sacrificing that level of convenience and comfort to pursue something that essentially is, well, maybe even greater than yourself. Like this podcast is shedding light on more than just you. It's for like creating basically like a platform for people like us to have a voice. So I think it's great.
Thank you. And I just have to like thank my husband really, because he's a big history buff. And he always reminds me, for example, we're not living in a third world country. We're not going through war right now. Like we live in America. Like we live in a place where like, even if you're broke, there are programs to help you like get out of that. Or there are programs that are willing to help you get back on your feet. There's just a lot of support in general in America. And in fact, most of the wealthiest people in America are immigrants because they saw the opportunity. So let's remember that.
A really important thing to shed light on, especially right now.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Without saying any more, yes. Well, Kara, we have had such an incredible conversation with you today. I learned so much from you, learning about your story and your background and the good work that you're doing today with slow fashion. I learned so much about that today. And I'm glad that I unknowingly was contributing to it by doing clothing swaps. So yay me. But for people that want to learn more about the flip side and even just learn more about like ethical fashion and sustainable fashion, how can they get a hold of you?
Well, as I said earlier, my website is in the process of being launched next month, so that there will be a way to communicate with me through there soon. But in the meantime, feel free to reach out to me at theflipside@icloud.com, or you can DM me on Instagram via @theflipside with 2 P's. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Kara, for joining us today. And thank you, Nani, for co-hosting as always. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with both of you. And for our listeners, if you had missed out on any of that information on how to contact Kara, no worries. You know how generous I am. I will include that information in the show notes. You're welcome. And I also have to say and remind you all that I worked really hard on those show notes. So just humor me and take a look at them. With that said, thank you all so much. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Tune in next time.
Thanks, everyone. And thank you, Kara, for joining us. Bye.
Thank you guys for having me. It's been a pleasure.